The observation deck of the Valerian warship stretched across 1,000 meters, offering a panoramic view of the blue marble below. Supreme General Kayvan stood with his 5 arms folded against his crystalline chest, his sensor nodes flickering with satisfaction as he studied the target world. His subordinate, Lieutenant Commander Voxel, approached with urgent footsteps, his bioluminescent patterns shifting nervously across his exoskeleton. Earth. What an unremarkable sphere it appeared from this distance, spinning lazily in the cosmic void without purpose or significance. Kayvan had conquered 47 worlds in his lifetime, each one surrendering to the might of the Valerian armada with minimal resistance. This planet would be no different. The preliminary scans showed a civilization fragmented by primitive nationalism, armed with nuclear weapons from a bygone era, incapable of coordinated defense. It was almost disappointing. Where was the challenge? Where was the thrill? Voxel presented the intelligence report with trembling appendages. Your Excellency, the atmospheric composition is compatible with our biology. Optimal invasion parameters are achievable within 72 hours. Their technology is laughably outdated. They communicate through radio waves and primitive satellite systems. Most of their nations remain in conflict with one another over resources and ideology. They would sooner fight each other than unite against an external threat. Kayvan's vocal harmonics produced a sound resembling laughter, a frequency that caused several junior officers to wince. Then send the message. Let them know that the Valerian Dominion has arrived. Give them a choice between submission and annihilation. They always choose submission in the end. The fear of death is universal among biological species. It unites them in their weakness. The communications department worked with practiced efficiency. The ultimatum was encoded into thousands of human languages, carefully extracted from decades of surveillance. The message propagated across every digital network, television broadcast, and radio frequency that Earth possessed. The world held its breath and then erupted into chaos. In New York, crowds gathered in Times Square, pointing at the massive holographic display that had hijacked every billboard and screen. In Cairo, military forces mobilized as generals shouted orders into communication devices. In São Paulo, people flooded the streets, some screaming in terror, others calling for immediate military action. The United Nations convened an emergency session within hours. Representatives from every corner of the planet crowded into the General Assembly chamber. The atmosphere crackled with tension and fear. Minister Okonkwo from the African Coalition stood at the podium, his deep voice carrying the weight of millions. We must consider diplomacy. These beings have technology we cannot comprehend. War is suicide. But General Hassan from the Middle Eastern Alliance disagreed vehemently. Diplomacy with invaders is surrender with a different name. We should marshal our forces immediately. Show them that Earth is not defenseless. Dr. Finch, a physicist and scientific advisor to the European Council, rose to speak. Her gray hair was tied back severely, and her eyes reflected decades of research into the cosmos. The signal they sent uses principles of physics that our science has only theorized about in the past 5 years. Whoever sent this message is centuries, perhaps millennia ahead of us technologically. We cannot win a conventional war. We can only negotiate or fade into insignificance under their dominion. The debate raged for hours. No consensus emerged. The world was divided, paralyzed by the magnitude of the threat. Kayvan watched from orbit as the 12-hour ultimatum deadline approached. He had anticipated this chaos. He had planned for it. Humanity's greatest weakness was its inability to unite, to surrender individual pride for collective survival. These humans would splinter, some nations capitulating while others resisted. Perfect. It would make the conquest tidier, the transition to Valerian rule smoother. The ultimatum expired without response. Not a message of surrender, not a declaration of unified defense, nothing but silence. Kayvan interpreted this as confirmation of humanity's paralysis. He issued the command for the first phase of occupation. 500 transport vessels detached from the Valerian fleet. Each one carried battalions of elite soldiers clad in adaptive armor, armed with plasma weapons, protected by energy shields that could withstand conventional explosions with ease. The transports descended through Earth's atmosphere in perfect formation, their hulls glowing white-hot from friction, appearing like a meteor shower to observers on the surface. They targeted the world's largest population centers: New York, Tokyo, Mumbai, Shanghai, Lagos, and Moscow. Military bases around the globe tracked them on radar, helpless to intercept. Fighter jets were scrambled, but everyone knew it was a symbolic gesture, a show of defiance destined for failure. The first transport reached New York's airspace and began descending toward Manhattan. Millions watched from windows and rooftops as the alien vessel hung impossibly in the sky, dwarfing the Empire State Building, casting a shadow over the entire city. This was the moment when humanity would either fight or submit. This was the moment that would define the species for generations to come. But something unexpected happened. Deep beneath the surface of the planet, in places humans had never excavated, in trenches at the ocean floor unknown to modern science, under layers of ancient rock and ice at the poles, something awakened. Sensors throughout the alien fleet suddenly screamed warnings. Energy signatures erupted across the entire planet. Power readings that should have been impossible for a primitive species surged outward like a tide. Kayvon felt the first cold touch of fear, a sensation unfamiliar to him after centuries of conquest and victory. The science officer aboard Kayvon's flagship, a being named Torsion whose crystalline body reflected light in prismatic patterns, reported with barely concealed panic in his vocal frequencies. "Supreme General, the planet itself is generating power. The energy readings are increasing exponentially. It is as if something massive is awakening beneath the surface. Whatever these structures are, they are not of human construction. They predate human civilization by millions of years." Kayvon's confidence wavered for the first time. Could there be indigenous lifeforms more advanced than the humans? Had the intelligence reports missed something fundamental? He watched the visual displays as the moon's orbit shifted perceptibly, moving to position itself between Earth and the Valerian fleet. The lunar surface then revealed its true nature as ancient dust fell away, exposing geometric patterns of metal and massive weapon emplacements. It was not a natural moon. It was a defensive platform. In New York, Dr. Finch felt the connection before she understood it consciously. It was like a door opening in her mind, flooding her consciousness with knowledge that should have taken centuries to achieve. She saw schematics of fusion reactors built at Earth's core. She understood the architecture of planetary defense systems. She felt the presence of billions of humans across the globe experiencing the same revelation simultaneously. Humanity was not the only intelligence on Earth. They never had been. The aliens had awakened something ancient, something that had been dormant for millions of years. A planetary defense system of incomprehensible scale. An artificial construct disguised as a natural world. Earth itself was a weapon, and Kayvon had activated it by invading. The transport vessels that had descended toward major cities now faced a dilemma they had never anticipated. Targeting systems locked onto them with perfect precision. Weapon emplacements emerged from the ground, rising on massive hydraulic platforms. The first transport above New York attempted to evade, but there was nowhere to run. A beam of energy, coherent and devastating, streaked upward and bisected the vessel. It fell from the sky like a burning meteor. Then another. Then dozens. The transport vessels that represented the flower of Valerian military might were annihilated with mechanical efficiency. Kayvon watched his forces disintegrate, powerless to intervene from orbit. This was not a conquest. This was a catastrophe. He had not invaded a planet. He had awakened a planetary defense system that viewed his invasion as the most severe threat conceivable. Torsion's crystalline form trembled as he reported. "Supreme General, we are detecting massive energy buildups at multiple locations. The planet's orbital defenses are powering up. Shield generators are reaching operational capacity. I am detecting weapon systems that our computers cannot even classify. The power levels are approaching our entire fleet's capacity. Kayvon faced a decision. Retreat would save his fleet, but it would mean reporting failure to the Valerian Dominion, a fate worse than death in a military culture that worshipped victory. Attacking this awakened planetary defense system would likely result in the annihilation of every vessel in his fleet. The planet would have to be glassed from orbit, reduced to slag, its resources and strategic value destroyed forever. But then something unprecedented occurred. A message was transmitted from the planet below, not through radio waves or conventional communication methods, but through quantum entanglement, broadcasting simultaneously to every receiver on the fleet. The message came in no language Kayvon recognized. It was older, carrying harmonics and frequencies that suggested artificial intelligence of tremendous sophistication. The message translated roughly to, threat detected. Analyzing invasion force. Calculating response parameters. Preparing countermeasures. Planetary defense system fully operational. All hostile forces designated for immediate elimination. Standing by for engagement protocols. It was not a surrender. It was not a negotiation. It was a simple statement of fact. The planet was ready to defend itself, and everyone aboard the Valerian ships knew what that meant. Kayvon watched as the shield generators around the planet reached full power. Weapon systems tracked every ship in his fleet, thousands of targeting locks establishing with mechanical precision. For the first time in his long military career, Supreme General Kayvon understood the meaning of helplessness. Dr. Finch stood in the United Nations chamber, surrounded by world leaders and military commanders, all of them connected through the neural interface that had been established by the awakened defense system. The knowledge flowing into their consciousness was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. They understood now what Earth truly was and what they truly were. They were not rulers of their planet. They were caretakers of something far greater, guardians appointed by an intelligence that transcended human understanding. She spoke, and every person in the room heard her voice with perfect clarity. The system has analyzed the threat presented by the Valerian fleet. It has determined that the invaders represent an existential danger to Earth and its inhabitants. However, the system is also learning something from its interaction with human consciousness. It is learning what courage means. What hope means. What it means to fight for survival against impossible odds. The invasion force that Kayvon commanded stood at the threshold of annihilation. But instead of activating every weapon, instead of turning the planet into a graveyard of alien warships, something unexpected occurred. The planetary defense system transmitted a message directly to Kayvon's command ship. The message was simple but profound. You came seeking conquest. You found instead the remnants of a civilization far older than yours. We will offer you a choice. Retreat, and you may depart this system with your lives and report what you have witnessed. Remain, and your fleet will be destroyed. For a moment, all of Kayvon's pride warred against his survival instinct. He had conquered empires and broken kingdoms. He had never retreated from a fight. But he looked at the targeting information on his displays, saw the overwhelming firepower arrayed against him, and understood that glory meant nothing if he was not alive to claim it. With a voice that barely concealed his rage and humiliation, he issued the order to reverse course and prepare for jump to hyperspace. But as the Valerian fleet disengaged, something remarkable happened. The planetary defense system did not attack them as they retreated. Instead, it broadcast one final message to every consciousness connected to the neural interface. This is what you have learned today, that even the smallest civilization, standing united, can overcome threats that seem insurmountable. That ancient weapons and vast technology mean nothing if the will to fight is absent. Humanity has passed the first test. The system will remain dormant once more, but know this. The universe is far larger and far more dangerous than you ever imagined. Prepare yourselves. The next test may not be so merciful. As the alien ships disappeared from human space, jumping into folded dimensions, Dr. Finch felt the neural connection fading. But the knowledge remained. The understanding persisted. Humanity would never be quite the same again. They had faced an enemy from the stars and stood firm, not through military superiority but through the simple fact of their united will. The world celebrated, but beneath the joy and relief, there was something deeper. A realization that Earth's story was far more ancient and complicated than anyone had imagined. That somewhere in the distant past, a civilization far greater than the Valerian Dominion had built this world as a sanctuary and a weapon. And now, that sanctuary had welcomed them back into the knowledge of what they truly were, the inheritors of something vast, something powerful, something that demanded they grow beyond their petty conflicts and become worthy of the gift they had been given. The future stretched ahead, full of questions and mysteries. But humanity had proven something on that day. They had proven that they could rise to meet the challenges of the cosmos. They had proven that they belonged among the stars, not as conquerors, but as sentient beings capable of growth, change, and transformation. And most importantly, they had learned that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from weapons or technology, but from the simple courage to stand together when everything else fails.